Namaste. Good morning. Suprabhatam. I am Prabhakar Tijare, Executive Member of Vishwa Adhyan Kendra, popularly known as VAK, a Center for International Studies. Welcome you all for the today's function. We always refer as VAK the Talk. I welcome you all on behalf of President Shri Ajay Gajaria ji and the Secretary Gyanindra Mishra ji of Vishwa Adhyan Kendra. As many of you aware, Vishwa Adhyan Kendra has initiated a panel discussion on very pertaining subject, that is Refugee, a Universal Challenge. We have planned to have the panel discussion on this subject in 6 different episodes. We all aware the first episode of the series was held on the chapter 1, that is the history of refugee, its universality and causes. It was held on 27th of October. Many of you must have attended that. If not attended, you must have viewed that session on our YouTube. Today, we have arranged second episode on the chapter number 2, that is desired destination of refugees. Are they natural, deliberate, compelled, or planned? We have very two eminent personalities to share their thoughts on the subject. However, we would like to start today's proceeding by invoking the grace of Goddess Saraswati. I invite Srimati Sonali Pandit to recite the Saraswati Vandana. Over to Sonali ji.
Ya kundendu tusharhara dhavala, ya shubhra vastramruta, ya veena varadanda manditakara, ya shveta padmasana, ya brahmachuta shankara pravritibhi, devai sada vandita, सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापः शुक्लां ब्रह्मविचारसारपरमां आद्यां जगद्व्यापिनीं वीणापुस्तकधारिणीम् अभयदां जाड्यान्धकारापहम् हस्ते स्फटिकमालिकां विदधतीं पद्मासने संस्थितां वन्दे तां परमेश्वरीं भगवतीं बुद्धिप्रदां शारदां नमस्कार.
Thank you, Sonali ji. We all aware that our 6-episode series on the Refugee, a Universal Challenge is being moderated by Dr. Sakti Prasad Srichandan ji, Assistant Professor, Center of European Studies in the School of International Studies of Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. Before we proceed, let me introduce Vishwa Adhyan Kendra. Vishwa Adhyan Kendra is the registered non-profit, non-governmental organization, provides the platform to deliberate on various international events to develop India-centric viewpoint. We are aware that India is the ancient civilization with a tradition of knowledge-based society. We all know, we believe in the thoughts of Anu Bhadraha Krutvo Yantu Vishwataha. Let the noble thoughts come to us from all the direction. To propagate the same thoughts and spirit, Vishwa Adhyan Kendra serves as a platform for understanding various cultures and traditions around the world through conducting seminars and studies. Our sole objective is to attain the world peace. That is why our prayers are always Vishwa Dharma Prakashena Vishwa Shanti Pravartake. Some of you must have aware our annual events of Universal Brotherhood Day as well as the Lakshman Rao Bhide Memorial Lecture. Let me introduce our speakers for the today's event. We have with us Dr. Professor Kapil Kumar ji, Director of Indira Gandhi Center for Freedom Struggle Studies and the Chairperson, Faculty of History, Indira Gandhi National Open University. He was also Member Secretary, Indian Council for Historical Research. He holds personal professor's chair in contemporary Indian studies in various universities of West Indies. Dr. Kapil Kumar has more than 38 years of teaching as well as research experience. He has his expertise on modern Indian history, heritage and environmental studies, inter-community relations, as well as applied history. He has published various papers on colonial exploitation, resistance, and forced migration, as well as challenging colonial historiography. He has presented papers on challenges in higher studies, as well as laborers to labor leader. He has presented in Suriname this paper. He has various interaction, has elected as treasurer for International Association of Studies in Indentured Labor and Migration. Professor Kapil Kumar ji has written various books. Some of them are Peasants in Revolt, Kisan Vidroha Congress or Angrezi Raj, Peasants Betrayal, Essay in Colonial History. Dr. Kapil Kumar ji has done innovations in distance learning and introduction to new models in open learning system. With such a wide and deep knowledge on historical events and studies on migration, Dr. Kapil Kumar ji is the apt speaker on today's topic. On behalf of Vishwadhan Kendra, we welcome Dr. Kapil Kumar ji. Our second guest today is Dr. Sheetal Sharma, Assistant Professor, Center of European Studies in the Jawaharlal Nehru University. She has in her credit PhD in Sociology. Her area of expertise are diaspora studies, cultures and society in Europe, methodology for social sciences and sociological studies. She has been selected for European Union's Visitors Program for year 2020 to gain first-hand information on European Union's values, functionings, activities, policies, and perspectives. Dr. Sheetal has been awarded grants to carry out various projects such as art and culture in everyday life, socio-cultural aspect of Indian diaspora in UK. Dr. Sheetal is recipient of JNU Research Excellence Award for her outstanding contribution in the field of social sciences and humanities. She has been invited as experts in European Commission to assist Research Executive Agency, as well as she has been invited by Government of India's HRD Ministry for evaluation of various institutions. Her best peer-reviewed publications are there. Some of them are Indian European Responses to Migration and Refugee Crisis, Social and Political Participation of Indian Diaspora in UK, Multiculturalism in India and Europe, governance of migrations and diversities, gender equality, status of women in Central and Eastern Europe. She has patented her videos lectures on various topics. Few of them are globalization and social changes, emergence of different cultures in various dimensions, liberty and importance of freedom, anti-globalization, cultural changes and cultural identities, alternative center of power. She has widely spoke on the subject related to post-Cold War and international economics thereafter, and many more on the topics of New World Order, post-Cold War. Dr. Sheetal has a bright career in international studies, including history of migration and refugees. On behalf of Vishwa Adhyan Kendra, we welcome Dr. Sheetal Sharma for today's panel discussion. We all know Dr. Shakti Prasad Srichandan now become the family name in the Vishwa Adhyan Kendra. He has consented to moderate all the 6 episodes which we are going to plan in the future days to come. Dr. Srichandan is the assistant professor of European Studies in the School of International Studies in Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has a wide experience, including the working on the national securities. We welcome Dr. Srichandan and looking forward to get these events moderated. Last but not least, I welcome all the audiences today who have joined us on the Zoom as well as the Facebook Live. We welcome once again, I welcome one and all for today's program. So without further delay, I will hand over the today's proceeding to Dr. Srichandan, and so that he can proceed further in introducing the subject in detail as well as moderating the today's event. Over to Dr. Srichandan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prabhakar ji. Namaste and good morning to all of you. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity to moderate this panel discussion on Back the Talk, Refugee, a Universal Challenge. In the chapter 1 held on 27th October, the series covered history of refugees, compelled migration, its universality and causes. And in this chapter 2, the series will attempt to cover the theme desired destination of refugees. Are they natural, deliberate, compelled, or planted? So in my view, no study of refugee movement would be complete without examining the choices made by refugees in relation to destination countries. For many of the refugees, choices are limited and sometimes do not exist at all. One of the dominant themes which emerges from the literature in this area is that refugees make choices within a very limited field of options. Their ability to make decisions about their journey and their destination is constrained by factors such as geography, finances, available travel routes, visa options, networks, and routes used by people smugglers. Decisions are made on the run and may change according to circumstances encountered during their journey also, or information heard along the way. So it is very uncertain. It is also important to remember that refugee movements almost always involve an element of chance, and this is often more important in influencing the eventual destination country than choice. So going beyond these established literatures, Vishwa Adhyan Kendra through this session is making an attempt to understand the other dimensions of destination choices of refugees. So with this, may I now invite our distinguished panelists to address this session. Before you start, I need to inform you that this session is structured in two parts. In the first part, each of our panelists may take up to 25 minutes to share their ideas and views. At the end of 25 minutes, I will give a gentle reminder. In the second part, we will have a question answer session. So without making any further delay, may I now request our first speaker, Professor Kapil Kumar, to give his talk. Professor Kumar, this virtual floor is all yours now. Over to you. Professor Kumar, you have to unmute.
It's okay. Thank you, Dr. Srichandan, and thanks for providing this opportunity to share the views, because my interest in this topic generated basically as a student when I was studying partition and modern India. And then later on, when I spent a few years in University of West Indies, looking at the diaspora aspects, and where I challenged the colonial historiography quite a bit in this regard. Now, the situation today is, I was very tense when I kept seeing these reports from America, the kind of terms which are being used today. They call them illegal migrants. The other term used is, our side here is refugees. But the English words itself, you see, migrant, refugee, and an intruder. They are three different words. Migration can be by choice. There can be compelled migration. There can be forced migration. And in a big way, I take the indentured labor who was taken out of India was more of a forced migration than any other thing. And then if we talk of refugee, I'm so shocked to find that in India today, everyone is a refugee who has intruded into this country. Because we know that legally, refugee is a status. One has to ask that one is a refugee in a country. So once they come or they want to take refuge, they have to come to our border post, give their particulars, okay, we want to take refuge in this country. Give us the refugee aspect. It is not that you intrude into different parts of the country, as we are seeing today with Bangladeshis or with the Rohingyas and all. You spread all over India, and when you are caught, you say, I am a refugee. And I am shocked the way our lawyers, I do use this term 1 rupee lawyer now, because Supreme Court fined him 1 rupee. I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone. But when they call them refugees, I raise this question. Okay, did the Rohingyas know the route up to Jammu? That they intrude from Burma border into India and they land up in Jammu right behind the cantonment. And what kind of activities they are indulged in? And our top lawyers and these so-called human rights activists, they call them refugees. Under which category? I'm shocked at that. Now, I remember I was at the opening releasing a book in Jaipur. It was a very good book titled as Sikh Migrants of Jaipur. But I told the author that your title is wrong. This old gentleman Sardarji sitting right in front of us, who's above 90. Please ask him, did he want to migrate? Did he want to migrate? This was a forced throwing out of people from their houses through communal rioting, rape, murder, etc. And they were thrown out of their places. So how can I call them migrants? They were not willing to do that. And what I realize is that this Western world has coined up very interesting terminologies to cover up the responsibilities of colonialism, or later on in the present world, these big powers, the games they play for their own vested interest on humanity. To cover that up, another term has been in use for the last couple of years now by sociologists: mobility studies. Now, today's mobility and the mobility which was thousands of years back or 500 years back is not the same. You can't put them under the category of mobility studies. That if a war has taken place in Syria and the people of there are moving out, you call it mobility studies. If the minorities in Pakistan are butchered and they take refuge in India, you call it mobility studies. I don't know what a worse expression can be there of the brutalities carried out on the minorities or on the people. And to save them, you bring under the category of mobility studies or migration or this kind of things. There is no migration. Even within the migration aspect, you will have to categorize. In mobility, you will have to categorize. You will have to differentiate between intruders and refugees. And how overnight these things change. I remember an Indian leader when she shouted in the parliament against Bangladeshis that they should be thrown out of the country. And today the same leader, being a chief minister, welcomes them. I have seen with my own eyes on the Bangladesh borders that our BSF post is behind, but a particular party's office is ahead of that. And when the people land from there, they are handed over their ration cards, from which they can make their voting cards. Will you call them refugees? Will you call them migrants? Or will you look at it from another point of view also, which has now taken a very, very definite shape, particularly when it is going to Europe now and these other countries also from the Middle East. Tell me, why not a single Islamic country takes Islamic refugees? Leave aside the Afghanistan-Pakistan thing. Why Iran refuses to take refugees from Afghanistan, though very genuine refugees, I will call them? Or why any of the Gulf states, why doesn't Dubai or Bahrain or Oman or Abu Dhabi or Kuwait or any of these states takes these refugees? And then when they go, when you talk of destination choices, they prefer to go to democratic countries. Why? You go there, you take refuge, and then after a while, you want your own laws. You want the Sharia to be there. You want that all your customs, your everything and all related to your religion should be defended in those countries. Why? You don't follow the constitution of those countries. You don't follow the laws of those countries. And if you have taken refuge in a country and you refuse to respect the constitution of that country, then do you deserve to be called a refugee? One looks at humanitarian angles from many angles. But within this humanitarian angle, one doesn't take into account that your humanitarian angle of giving them refuge, is it reciprocal from their side? Sometimes it sounds to me like that old story from the desert. The camel wanted his head inside the tent and then ultimately threw out the owner of the tent outside and was inside the tent. Because you have to correlate this thing also today with the ideology which is working behind this. I am not denying the genuine refugees. What has happened in Afghanistan, from a progressive point of view, to again Taliban taking over, the progressives being executed there, tortured there, troubled there, those I will call the genuine refugees. But when they move in, then how do you ensure that how many of the Taliban hardcore are not moving among them? We have had cases, in fact, Sonali would be knowing more of this since she studied Europe and all, that how many of them crossed over to Europe under the garb of refugees to carry out the terror activities. And certain aspects of this movement or intrusion has to be looked into along with excuse me, the ideology which is openly propagated by ISIS today. I think everyone has seen that map which they have produced, that right from West Asia, covering whole of Afghanistan, Central Asia and India, and going right up to Burma and Indonesia, where they want an Islamic rule. And making people move this way is a part of their strategy. I've seen this happening in constituencies. If your population has reached in a constituency from 20 to 22% that you can affect the election in that constituency, you move out your population from that constituency to another constituency to increase your voting rights over there. And I can prove it, because I am one of those who doesn't speak without evidences on these issues. So it is a context, this context has to be looked into from its various aspects today. It cannot be looked at only from the humanitarian point of view and putting it as a refugee thing or a migrant thing and all that. There are migrants who may be going for jobs. They face their visa problems. They have the visa B problem, perhaps between America, India also. There's another set of migrants which is going every day from Cuba to America. Those things took place, or now from the side of this Mexico side and all, which goes on into America. That is one aspect related to that. But can you take up the case of Cubans who are trying to illegally enter America? Can you compare them with those who are moving out from certain West Asian countries to the Western world? And the impact it is having over there. I was in Australia and I was telling the Australians, in the name of multiculturalism, what you are doing, this was way back in 2008, I was an Endeavour fellow there at Monash. And I was telling them the kind of ghettos which you are creating here today. This is where the Palestinians are staying, this is where the Pakistanis are staying, this is where Bangladeshis are staying, this is where Indians are staying. You're calling it multiculturalism. But does it work? And even one entry will affect you. And that has happened. I posed a question on Delhi. The entire Delhi today is surrounded by illegal Bangladeshi intruders, the word I will use. I will not call them refugees, I will not call them migrants. Any corner of Delhi on all four sides, you move in. And now the addition is Rohingyas to that. And if two in each colony, on one in each of these slums, is an ISIS agent, and if they start one day, from all sides, one person, 17, 18 persons start firing, move in with AK-47s, what will you do? The Delhi riots are one example. The deep studies conducted into these riots. Who were the participants? These illegal intruders. The way they were. What was Shaheen Bagh? Why Shaheen Bagh was picked up as a experimental lab? I was saying right at that time, the very first day this incident started, because I had some knowledge of the area. This is not a doing of any political party. It is the doing of PFI, ISIS and Naxalites against CAA. And why they have picked it? Because this is an area where the entire land belonged to the DDA, Jamia University, or some part of it to the UP, that canal department, which was taken over by the land mafia. They cut it into plots and sold it out to Bangladeshis and people from Eastern UP and Bihar and all. And these people have no valid legal document with them to prove the validity of the house they bought over there. So the best experiential place to start a movement against the CAA. And the entire movement against the CAA, because it is related to this whole aspect of refugee and migration and all that. I want to know, how are the Muslims in India affected by CAA? Why should they oppose it? What is their argument? Can they give a single argument? But they opposed it. And that is why, when I'm saying that today in this whole context, one has to look at different dimensions. That was a straight different dimension of the protests which started against the CAA. Going into that. And this whole problem, you see, even in Assam, when they say this problem is there, I've seen documents of 1946-47. If you see Lionel Carter's, those military intelligence and all reports which have been published now, declassified and all. How Muslim League at that time had started planting people in the areas of Chittagong and in the areas of Assam. We talk of refugees. If the Bangladeshi refugees come, put up all habitation around this place, Gajaria, affect our environment, will not follow our laws of India, will not have any respect for Indian laws, or anything related to India. In what respect you will call them refugees? And refugee and the kind of aggression shown jointly, the kind of aggression shown by the Rohingyas. So I don't want to look at these positions now from the created agencies world over like Amnesty International and all, who keep doing blah, blah, blah. COVID happened. Tell me one thing. in so many countries. So many deaths. We didn't find anyone leaving Pakistan because of COVID. We didn't find anyone leaving Bangladesh because of COVID. Why do Bangladeshis should leave? And those champions internationally who claim that they are poor people and all, and that's why they are leaving. Why did they improve the conditions in Bangladesh? It has ample resources for development. Create the positions there for them. Why put a burden on our economy? And why put a security threat to us? Why can't the UN do that? Why can't the Amnesty International do that? Why can't the international bodies do that? At least I'm talking in terms of poverty and all. Where people migrate because of poverty, because of these no jobs and all. Why hasn't the UN and the countries of the world bothered about this aspect to improve the economy and country there, conditions there, rather than taking that population burden on their own, in their own country? I'm waiting for the day. I say it very bluntly. Given the name of England is going to be changed to Englistan. The day is not far. It may take 10 years, or it may take 12 years, or it may take 15 years. Why there are certain countries in Europe like Russia or Poland and all who are protecting their borders? You are welcome in my country. Okay, you are a poor person. I'll welcome you in my country. I'll help you in my country. But you have to follow the constitution of my country. You have to follow the laws of my country. This can't be done. That you come to my country, I give you refuge, I give you all facilities, and then you show me your eyes that you will live by your own religious practices, or you will live by your own Shariat, because you can't keep my country below your religion. This can't be done. I've been saying this. Your identity comes out of your nation. It doesn't come out of your religion. Even if you go for your religious pilgrimage, they're also like the Indians, the Muslims from India over there, they are known as Indian Muslims. They are not known as Muslims of India. And for every country. So have that in mind when we go for it. And this whole question, why tell me one thing. I would have supported many in India if they had only helped Rohingyas, that they have been thrown out, they are poor, they have no jobs and all. As a humanitarian ground, with my own emotions to help humanity, I would have helped them. But if those who say that they are Muslims and they have been thrown out and that is why we have to support them, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Because then the whole purpose changes, the whole motive changes, the whole aspect changes in that. And we have seen this. You've seen our last, I don't use the word these Lutian and all, but some of our own people, they keep their mouth shut. Yesterday only, you've seen a statement about women in one of the assemblies in in the states. Where are these great feminists from JNU? Sorry, Sheetal, I'm not including you. Where are they? Where is Barkhadar? Where is Arfa Khatun? Where is Rana Ayub? Where is Mehbooba? Where is Sonia Gandhi? Or where is that Swara Bhaskar? No issue then. If a Sikh doctor is murdered in Pakistan, or Sikh girls of minority, Hindu and Sikh girls, you all know, I don't have to give those stories what happened in Pakistan. And for that our politicians' eyes are blind. And the manufacturer of terrorism is the Bhai Sahab of our state political party president. What do you do? These all got. I'll give you a very interesting thing of 1947. Initially, why Jinnah declared again at that time Pakistan is a secular state. Very few people know this aspect. Initially, he fought for Islamic State, got Pakistan, and then suddenly turns over and says, everyone can stay here, it's a secular state. Why? Because when he's told, if these 3 crore Muslims come from India, where will you put them? And then he realizes and changes the stance. And in many aspects, while reading this also, while classifying also, one has to take into account, I'm saying, the brutalities practiced on humanity. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that a migration or refugees, whatever they came in 1970 from Bangladesh, where their general had said, कि हम इनकी नस्ल बदल देंगे, and the kind of rapes and all that massacres which had taken place in Bangladesh, yes, they needed a refugee status. But then when things became normal over there, this aspect also has to be taken into account. The Sheetal is working on these aspects, that how many of those go and take refuge because of such conditions, but when things are normal back home, how many want to come back? And there may be different variations of destination choice of refugees. Most of the time I feel they have no choice. I remember some in Afghanistan even right now didn't want to come to India. Some statement came they want to go to Canada, but they had no choice. They had to come to India only. But then, within that also, where the choices are excised or not excised at all, one has to look at the movement of these people in a consequential aspect also. Okay, you took refuge in Germany. From there, where you moved to? What was your aim? Likewise, seeing in diaspora, that now many of the diaspora, Indian diaspora, moved out to Canada, America, or Netherlands, and these places, the second generation or the third generation. But among these, it is happening here in the first generation itself. Those who are moving out. So I think a host of issues have to be taken into account while analyzing, studying, and planning for these issues. You need a full plan today, how to handle it. We failed because the government made no plan for Bangladeshis coming here. The government had no plan for Rohingyas. You wake up suddenly and you have seen even the camps which are made and all, it is not useful. Some kind of these plans are to be made for the future purposes also, and the monitoring aspect of those plans also, rather than leaving it to these bureaucrats, the gigantic structure of bureaucracy, particularly in our country, is the most illiterate sitting over there. Illiterate in sense of intellect, I am saying, not in terms of illiteracy and all that. And it's a time now that if you are talking globally, you make global policies, but any global policy, unless the local conditions are not taken into care of the country where they seek a destination or of a country from where they are moving out, that environment and that conditions also have to be brought into this kind of a thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kumar. May I now request Professor Sheetal Sharma to give her talk. Professor Sharma was my teacher when I was a student at Center for European Studies, and now we are colleagues. I'm really luckiest few who is working with her. She's apart from the recognitions and awards she has received, which Prabhakarji told us today. She is one of the most popular teachers in JNU and inspiration for newly inducted teachers like me. And over to you, ma'am. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Sakti. Good morning to all of you. And thanks, Sakti, for being such, kind and lovely words that you have given to me early in the morning. You say that you have made my day. Now, namaskar to all those, the panelists, as well as the representatives of VAK and all the audience, those who are present to have this lively discussion on the topic pertaining to refugees. Now, as a sociologist, I would say that refugee is a very sensitive and a contested concept and a phenomenon. And why do I say so? Why do I say that this is contested? Because this is so much multifaceted, that even multifaceted or multidimensional is a very small concept to gauge or to encompass the wide variety of reasons, actor, factor, actions, intentions to actually come onto a general conclusion. For instance, if the topic under lens today is that why refugees are there, where do they go, why do they go, are they planted or are they natural, compelled, and all these things, I must say that the reasons are everybody in a sense. You may have certain categories or something like that, but refugee is not a monolith category as we tend to understand. Now, when we say that it's not a monolith category, similar are the causes and consequence and impact, experience, and everything about refugees. So it's multidimensional, multifaceted, complex, very, very complex, deep in the sense that we really need to understand and dissect if we are trying to understand it academically. And as Kapil sir was talking about, there are two positions about it. One is an academic position and another one is a practical position, a real position that we talk about the world and how the phenomenon of refugee is unfolding and is studied. I'll try to start with the academic and then talk about the practical and combine the two from a sociological perspective. Now, how this concept of refugee came into existence. Imagine 1947, 13th of August. Absolutely no line or no border differentiating people. There were cultural belts existing from Sindhu to Sindhu. And we were being called as Hindu or Bharat Khande or whatever, Bharatvarsh, whatever you can think about. And suddenly, overnight, there are people, those who are living in their own territories for ages together, since ancient India, since civilization, suddenly acquire or called as refugee overnight. What has gone into this phenomena? What has happened overnight that somebody who was a legitimate owner of a plot of land or a field or a house in a particular village or hamlet suddenly is a refugee in their own land? This is one of the perils of, or one of the most devastating character of modernity or political systems of the modern time. Why do I say so once again? Imagine nation states. When did they originate? They might have originated some, say, 200 years back, or since Westphalia, some 400 years back, or something like that. I take you back into history, 600 years back into history. Was there anything called as nation state? What we derive pride now out of these Silk routes, spice routes, settlers, amalgamation, multiculturalism, hybrid culture, Ganga Jamuna Sabhyata, and all these things. These were the times, these were the eras, these were the ages. At that point of time, people had no compulsion over showing my passport, having it a valid visa, no valid visa, expiry of visa, my photograph, my biometric, absolutely nothing. That was the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam that we have during Sanatan, since Sanatan Dharma has been established here on Bharat Khande. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, borderless world. Now, this is something that was devastated, that was dismantled by the ruthless logic of modernity, which established political or states having territory or boundary with the polity, with the government, and the legitimate right of the state to use power over its people. One thing. Now, if this is a present reality, there can be a futuristic possibility of dissolving the borders as well, but that is very, 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 very utopian. I'm saying very, very so many times, you can add more veries to it, but yes, that is a possibility, but very difficult to be realized. Now, when I talk about refugees, what, why, when, where, whom do they impact? These are some of the dimensions that are associated with the concept of migration or refugee. Who is a refugee? Refugee is a person who has moved. Migrants also move, but then they move not out of compulsion, but out of choice. Sometimes it's economic, sometimes it's educational, sometimes it's maybe health reason or better opportunities, business opportunities. A migrant primarily is moving out because of his voluntary choice. He is not compelled, although of course there can be latent factors compelling him. But yes, more often than not, it's a voluntary and economic contribution more so among all other reasons. Whereas a refugee is a person who has been compelled by a certain set of circumstances to move from one place to another or seek refuge, beg for his life. An asylum seeker is a person who has applied for a refugee status in a particular state. He has filled the form, he has established legally that I am unable to survive or I fear persecution in my own territory, and now please grant me a refugee status. So he is an asylum seeker unless it's stamped that he's having a refugee status, which almost takes 6, 7, sometimes 1 year for the status to get established. Now, apart from refugee, asylum seeker, you have migrant, both legal and illegal migrant. Say, for example, we have a large number of illegal people staying in different countries, but we call them as migrants. Then you have tourists, travelers. Then you have another set of category of people, of spy, infiltrators, or you can say terrorist, infringe elements. And then you have, the set of people, those who are stateless. They do not belong to any territory, nation state or territory or part of any country where they can claim a citizenship. And then you have people who are called as internally displaced people. Within their own countries, they are displaced because of certain reasons, actors, or climatic conditions. Now, since this phenomena has gained so much of momentum, and when we look at the numbers, there are almost 84 million, which is almost 8.5 crore, people are there in the world, which would have made it 21st highest populated country if you look at all types of people, those who are displaced or those who have been dislocated from their own place. And if we just talk of number of refugees, it's around 2.5 crore, so that it's more populous than many of the countries in the world, almost 51st populated country in the world, if we just take number of refugees. But why do these people move, and what are the circumstances? Kapil sir has nicely highlighted the advantages and disadvantages of all these movements. But let me tell you that reasons for which people move. The first is the religious. and which is one of the most dominant, because now religion has come into existence. We talk of secularization, countries being secular. He was telling you that Pakistan was suddenly declared as secular, but religion happens to be one of the prime factors of our identity today, defining who am I. Apart from my name, the next set of identity, I would say, formally we talk about nations, but then the second most important identity after my name comes is what religion you belongs to. Religion is one important criteria which induces the phenomena of escape from one place to another, because people face persecution. And in Afghanistan, you have Sikhs and Hindus and Jews. History is full of such examples where people have been persecuted. Then the second is national, or nationality being another important factor which leads to or compels people to move. The third important factor, I would say, is political and social. Why political and social? Say, for example, Kashmiris within our countries are internally displaced people because of socio-religious amalgamation, combination of various factors. I'm listing them as separate factors, but then they are overlapping and a perfect combination to create such compelling conditions for people to leave a place. Then you have racial reasons for people to move from one place to another. Political, war, gender, hunger, climate change. These are some of the examples or some of the reasons that you categorize as, the reasons for which people leave their area or leave their homelands and move to another country. Now, behind all these reasons, the biggest reason, the driving motor, is the conflict. Now, what is this conflict? Why this conflict is there? First of all, that gets manifest in all these forms, say religion, national, political, social, war, gender, or climate change. What are these? The main reason is the conflict of sets of people, or sometimes more set of people. Now, what is this conflict? Let us dissect this idea of conflict also. Number one type of conflict is, the first type, I would say, typology, is the conflict which is imposed upon you or is inflicted upon you. It is not my conflict. It has been given to me. The war on terror is one such instance where the conflict is imposed upon regions in the name of something. What is that something? Democratization, restructuring, fall of certain forms of government, establishment of certain new forms of government, gender empowerment, or upliftment of humanity in the name of development, something which reflects or reverberates or echoes the white man's burden upon, that we have to civilize the world, we have to go on to civilizing mission. So one is the inflicted or externally imposed conflict upon people. The second type of conflict that we identify is something which is inherited and which is induced strategically into our system. It is induced strategically. In fact, it is structured strategically. Say, for example, some kind of conflicts we have inherited. These are ethnic conflicts. These are racial conflicts. These are conflicts which are reflecting anything, maybe sometimes caste, maybe ethnic differences, because some are generic differences and some are very specific differences. Say, for example, me as a South Asian, if I'm in UK, I'm seen in general a South Asian. There, my generic differences are pitching me against a white person, or me seen as brown, and my specific differences, that are whether I'm a Pakistani or an Indian, are something which is a step after generic differences are taken care of. So sometimes you have imposed conflicts, sometimes you have inherited conflict, which are your part of your own engineered. You create conflict. You can create it internationally or you can create it nationally. And here you have ideological wars. Cold War was an engineered conflict. It was created. And then it created a whole lot of divide, Berlin Wall, Iron Curtain. The world divided into two parts, East and Western Bloc. And this conflict was difficult to tide over because the entire state machinery, the two power blocks, military muscle, might, everything was being poured into keeping the fire of the conflict alive. making it as ferocious as possible. And these are ideologically constructed, which then further feed into your inherited and imposed. So once again, I would say that when I'm trying to give you a kind of understanding of conflicts, once again, they are not just categories existing in isolation with one another, but they are related to one another. The fourth one is now, after inherited, imposed, and the third one engineered, the fourth one is by the non-state actors. And this is the most dangerous, because this does not even, observe any decency of the state mechanism or state craft that you have, because it does not even spare its own people. It's kind of Frankenstein in making. And that is where you have non-state actors, which tend to become a force, a governing authority in themselves. And this is what they, hami case hai, hami adalat hai, hami executive hai, hami judiciary hai. And they are the people, those who are not from the formal, modern, bureaucratic, scientific, rational, objective institutions of modernity or the political system. They are the people, those who emerge, pop from anywhere. And extremist elements all across the world in the name of Islamic republics, they have been operating under the garb of this name, and they are self-styled governance systems, and Taliban is one of the best examples. Now, where do people go? Where do people go? That's the second question that is under investigation. People go to their neighboring areas. Number one, you remember in Syria, large number of people into Jordan, lakhs and lakhs of people, almost 20-25% of population went to Jordan, the neighborhood. 1971, India bore the brunt. When we talk about Mediterranean crisis, the WANA region, North Africa and West Asia, large number of people go to Europe. I'll bring you some interesting examples from Europe here in this context, since I work on European studies. It's not about the refugee. Let's keep the reasons for a while on the back seat, and then talk about how we perceive the Western world to be very systematic, corruption-less, taking care of all these issues, deal with the crisis, and they have a very swift mechanism to take care of. Absolutely all myths get shattered when we look at some of the realities operating there. Just a couple of examples. The mafia that was transporting people from one place to another, they were operating in full swing. And one individual to be transported from Syria to say Italy, Malta, or Cyprus, or whichever closest European border you can land upon, they used to charge around 1,200 euros per individual. And if you want to reach alive, and then there are rate lists that if you want to give 800 euros, you have a dinghy boat which can be punctured or easily get punctured. You have seen those photographs where the boat is tilted. If the boat has a capacity to keep 60 people seated, it will have 100 people, 30, 80 people, third time the capacity, three times the capacity of the boat. Then if you really want to go into a steel and wooden boat or a motorized boat, then you have to shell out 1,600 euros. Imagine a family of 10 traveling, because you are not going to go alone. And as I said here, a refugee is not a monolith category. We tend to talk about number. We tend to look at men. We tend to look at pictures, large number of people walking. But look deeper. Where are the women? Where are the children? Where are the old people? Where are the disabled? We tend to assume everything in this category. And I bring you one interesting thing to think about, that when a boat capsizes, sometimes they have been deliberately punctured after taking so much of money, because they do not want to get caught by Forex or Europol, Frontex or Europol. So all kinds of misdeeds are happening. And then the able-bodied, those who are 75 kgs, strong enough, those who know swimming, not everybody knows swimming, they can swim 4 kilometers up to the shore. Once again, women, children, aged, disabled, what will happen to them, and even those who do not know swimming. So the reasons are that the so-called the grand structures of modernity, developed nations, and all these things, they also expose the cracks that were there in terms of management of this crisis. And then, you know, the divide between Eastern and Western European countries to take in refugees. And refugees, what they said, okay, Europe has some of the reasons. Sometimes you say it's a demographic deficit, Germany needs people to come and work for them and all these things. I'm not going into those popularly known stories from newspaper and media. I'll tell you something which is less known. Now, what happened to the Dublin Convention? Why Europe came under stress? The Union, once of the enemy countries, belligerent nations, those who had 2 world wars, the entire world was engulfed into 2 world wars only because of these Europeans, Russia and US at one point of time. So these guys were engulfed. They became part of this conflict, the global conflict, only because of these countries. And then suddenly they overcome all the kind of differences they had and form a union. But union came under a lot amount of stress. Why stress? Because then there were differences over who governs. Germany, the dominant power, Germany, the hegemon, and then Germany tries to decide about who is going to take how many people. Some statistics. Poland had a quota of 5,000 refugees. That Poland has to take 5,000 refugees. They all right said, okay, all right, we'll take 5,000 refugees, but we'll take all white and Christians. Estonia is a small country with a population of 1.3 people. I think it's less than Delhi, 1/10 of Delhi. I think it's 1/10. Even Dwarka only you have 1.3 lakh, 13 lakh people staying. And they had a quota of how many people? 200 people only. And then there were bike rallies that were taken out in order to oppose quota. The quota was not much for many of the countries because Germany had taken major percentage of quota, 8 lakh people or something like that. So there were deaths. There were people, those who were fleecing the migrants, their vulnerability, the refugees, their vulnerabilities, and then there are the stories, blogs, and things which are being done in order to overcome, you know, such kind of the travesty of the humanity that humanity was facing. But at the same time, this created this refugee or the reasons of conflict or war, nationality, religion, all this created 2 sets of people. And I want to establish here the relevance of the in-group and out-group. When I say overnight, people in their own country became refugee, what did they become? They become, just 1 second.
Professor Sharma. Yeah.
Yes, I'm there. There was a slight disturbance.
Yes. Please continue.
Yes. So what happened overnight, people in your own country became refugee. And when I say they became refugee, they were seen as somebody else, an outgroup. When you draw boundaries, when you draw territories, the moment you have a feeling of we, you suddenly have a them, us and them, we and they. There is an in-group and there is an out-group. I would tend to identify certain ways in which in-group and out-group operate, and then establish the relevance of the types of conflict, in-group and out-group, and then see how do we see refugee phenomena operating within these matrices. Now, the first way in which in-group and out-group relate to one another, say me and you relate to one another, that in-group sees the out-group as anomaly. And they have to be there. And this leads to some types of conflict, which I mentioned just before, some time back. And this leads to compulsion over people to leave. Jews, Hindus in Afghanistan, or even Afghanis for that matter. It may not be religious, but in-group sees the out-group as anomaly, and out-group is somebody who does not adhere to or who does not believe into the set of ideals that you have established. The stronger the ideals, the more rigid, inflexible the in-group is, the greater is the number of or the propensity of the out-group. So number 1, the out-group is anomaly and enemy must be eradicated. Number 2, the in-group thinks that out-group is an indispensable thing. It is going to be there. It's inevitable, but we need to minimize our contact with them, whites and blacks. They are going to be part of the same society, country, or community, but then there has to be no interaction, social, whatever you call, you have to have a distinction. The third is that in-group and out-group think that the other is indispensable, they are going to stay there, but there is a hierarchy. There is a sense of imposition of dominance over the other, and this is ranking. Ranking where I consider to be myself superior than the other and make the life of the other as miserable. This is there in even our social institution up until global institutions, which are there. You may say IMF, WTO, whatever. The fourth way of relationship between understanding relationship between in-group and out-group is that the out-group is seen as a potential group of converts. Those who are offered certain incentives, social, economic, political, whatever, and then they are to be embraced into the fold of our religion, forced of converts. And the fifth one is very humanitarian, very idealistic. You may say, Dr. Sharma, what are you talking about? Kaise ho sakta hai? But our one of our values is about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, accommodation of all. But it is easier said than done, because people are driven by a large set of motives which go contrary to what you perceive in everyday life. So finally, coming on to how do we look at the issue of, when we look at refugees, number one, the first takeaway is that it's not monolith. Number two, the factors and reasons are as many as the number of refugees, because even within a family, people have diverse set of opinions and compulsion. If the husband is leaving, and this is not just for refugee, even for migration, when in diaspora study, we see that why women migrate, most of them are just following their husbands. So even if I have a very high flying fancy career in India, I might have to leave because my husband gets a job in Silicon Valley. So the reason is that why you migrate, and reasons are diverse. Number three, that when refugees come, they actually come with a kind of state where they are actually helpless and they need protection, and they are given protection. But they just do not come as boxes which can be kept in our storeroom. They come and they unfold their cultural baggage over a period of time. And the places where they live, Kapil sir was rightly identifying the ghettos where they live. These become sites of contestation, domination, mafia, control, black market, whatever gray areas, shady businesses, and this gets support from the domestic constituencies only for their own small benefits. Because sometimes these smaller constituencies, they forget or they lose the sight of the national agenda or the national benefit with their small interest. They tend to stoke fires of whatever kind they can in order to let this perpetrate. So the perpetrators of this conflict, the perpetrators of this victimhood, the perpetrators of this exploitation, they tend to see victims as a soft target to fulfill their own benefit. And this is why these become sites of crime. These become sites of underworld activities. These become sites of trafficking. These become sites of making black money, easy transit routes, prostitution, and whatnot. And then also they become sites for radicalization. You go and talk to them with high blood pressure, about your society, your community has been suppressed, you have been marginalized, and come and fight and lay your life in the name of, and one lone wolf attack is enough to destroy the peace, balance, equilibrium of a normally functioning state. So what happens? The refugee who was given a kind of stay on a compassionate ground, on a humanitarian ground, tends to become a weapon as soon as it gets a status. So how do we look at it? How do we look at, sociologically speaking, the treatments are as diverse as the number of refugees are. Although, of course, it's very difficult. It's no generalization that I'm making, yet it is a kind of generalization because one size does not fit all. we really need to understand, first of all, the identification of a problem. Say, for example, even in COVID is a COVID, but why do you have a Delta variant different from Omicron and some other variant? The first wave was different from the second, the third wave is expected to be among these. This is going to, what is this? This is individual specific, context specific nuances of a problem. Similar is this problem. It may not be seen as, you may pardon me for equating it with a kind of disease. Yes, it is a malaise. It's a social malaise. It's a social disease. And this is why the treatment requires the way it is infecting or it is influencing or disbalancing the balanced societies and countries. And that is why we say that it requires political will. It requires a unanimous decision by the people or the country or the communities, those who take them in. And then how do you develop certain strategies to even within those communities identify the potential dangerous groups as compared to potentially harmless group, as compared to people, those who can actually be absorbed into the economic system and things like that. I was seeing a question in the chat box which was talking about that, do they contribute economically also? Yes, they do. The Syrians were actually, and I have a very good Syrian journalist friend who has been in India for 35 years. And when he talks about this, he says that my country people were so educated that Europe is definitely going to benefit from them. Finally, coming on to the last leg of this, as I say that nation states, the refugees are creation of a nation state. Religion is a social construction. To do away with religion, we came up with the concept of secularization, which is a political construction. And refugees is, once again, a combination of socio-political and territorial construction. And this is where just being this side of the boundary or that side of the boundary creates a whole lot of confusion over who am I, where am I. Of course, very pathetic story, very somber stories from Europe, large number of stories where you are just buried as a number. I'm a living history. Am I just a number where my grave mentions 1414830, where in Mediterranean every day 10 people were losing their lives? One aspect of it. But at the same time, in the garb of refugee, in the garb of humanitarian crisis, you tend to push certain elements which actually take care of your malicious agenda or insidious things that you intend to do. So finally, refugees are a locational problem, but there are, yes, last 1 minute.
Sorry for the interruption. Just 25 minutes past, so maybe.
All right, so I end here. I will take
questions.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No, you can just, sum up.
Okay, I thought you were
giving
asking.
A reminder. I was just giving you a reminder.
All right. Okay, it's a reminder. Yes. So I would say that refugees is a territorial concept. Then it's a social, political, economic, whatever you may talk about. There are set of causes, there are set of consequences. There are set of factors and there are set of implications. The only thing that we require on our part, that we have to have a balance, because on this continuum where you have the most humanitarian positive, come sit on my head kind of, and do whatever you kind of a perspective, up until absolutely anomaly, annihilation, and all these things, there are various positions. And I am a social scientist. I always say between 0 and 99, there are endless positions which are there for us to follow. And yes, this will happen only with a kind of strong political will, a strong sense of nationalism that is there, although of course it creates the other, but in a positive sense. The third is that we need to have very systematic approach and a concerted effort to identify the needs, categories, impact, and the outcomes of the activities which are being done in the name of humanitarian issues, addressing them and all these things. And finally, the Western world, who has actually given all this to us, territories, idea of us and them, created conflict, influenced, imposed conflict, and all these things. Remember, they are not addressing the root cause. They are just doing a band-aid solution to the issues that they have created. The malaise lies much more deeper into the roots of other things. And it once again depends on how do we deal with it. There are some crises, we would continue to live with them until there one fine day we see. And in my lifetime, your lifetime, and even 100 years, it's a short time in the history and life of societies and nation to tackle such huge problems. But nevertheless, I'm very optimistic about the fact that, with a strong political will, with a strong leadership, with a coherent approach to deal such kind of malaise, solutions are not too far. Thank you so much, Sakti.
Thank you, Professor Sharma.
Riji, can you give me 2 minutes to
Yes,
add
yes.
a little bit to what excellent presentation Sheetal has given?
Yes, sir. Yes,
That will
Professor
help the
Kumar.
discussion,
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
I wanted to add 1 or 2 things in this. You see, the state protection to illegal migration. And China is the best example of that. You see, no one from China is allowed to move out unless the Communist Party clears the person's movement out there. Whether it is a student or whether it is a fashion designer or a tailor or whatever it is. Now this cash-starved universities in the West, privatization and all, they were too happy to have these students from China, and filling their coffers out of that. And what led to that in terms of radicalization there, in terms of certain ideas or what happened in terms of rights, that is one aspect. Second, I have seen in one center, who, what do they call that? These illegal people who are kept there, in a Caribbean state, out of 54, 52 were China. And what I've seen in that all these illegal Chinese who enter either Australia or who enter these places, the local population there, with the help of the embassy of China, gives them full shelter. That they will keep them unless they will open a restaurant or a Chinese restaurant and all. I was staying in Tuna Puna, and in a distance of 5 kilometers, I saw about 21 Chinese restaurants, and I started inquiring into that. Second aspect I want to say is, everyone knows this mafia. Sheetal made a very good point about these boat smugglers, human smugglers on boats and this and that and all, the aspect of it. Which is the government today, with all these modern means of your IT intelligence and everything, which doesn't know that who are the traffickers of this? They know it. But what kind of action? I have known people, I have talked to CPWD people who were doing the wiring on the Bangladesh border, that all will come from Home Ministry. Is village ko chhod diye. Don't do wiring on this village. This kind of a thing. And you see, Britain opened their visas for cooks at a time and took about 10,000 cooks from Bangladesh for England. And all these cooks disappeared. None of them was doing the cook job over there. This kind of a thing. And there's another category I tell you. Any country, if that country's national is lost in the other country after going on a proper documented visa, look at Americans will shout, what has happened to my national in that country? Where is he disappeared? He or she has disappeared. And India is the only country in the world where more than 2 lakh Pakistanis came on official visas and disappeared in this country. And what you may call sleeping agents and what you may call into that and all, these aspects have not been taken into account. Economy, yes, very particular, because this whole game of economy, you see in Australia, places like Australia, if there are no Indian students and there are no Chinese students, on Saturday, Friday evenings and Saturday and Sunday, the societies will collapse. Because that is the labor working there. Every joint over there on those evenings and all. But the kind of cultural impact it is having, I saw people in Sydney complaining, the Australians, all over this street has been taken over by the Chinese restaurants, and they are cooking Australian food, and we have lost our own cultural aspect of the Australian food over there. So Sheetal has very rightly pointed out that so many dimensions go into it, but we don't look into these various dimensions in making our policies.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kumar. We had some excellent presentation from our distinguished panelists. Now moving over to our question answer session. I will be, there are many questions in the chat box, and I have got some direct questions to put here also. I'll be reading those questions one by one, and I will request our distinguished panelists to answer those questions. The first question is from Mr. Prabhakar Tijareji. This question is for Professor Kumar. Why most of the Muslim migrants are insisting for non-Muslim countries, what historical data reveals?
I have already given the answer in my,
Yes.
you know, there are two dimensions, three dimensions to that. One is a very genuine aspect, that the way in Muslim countries women don't have rights. Okay, they can't work. And there are genuine people who want their families, their girls and women to go up and rise and do all those kinds of things. It's a very genuine aspect related to that aspect. The second is the other aspect. I have told you that after some time, that same person having a progressive look and who brings with the family with this item and all, as Sheetal has pointed out, then goes back into radicalism, you know, or is forced into radicalism, I would say, into this context, you know. That a person, all see in England, all the Muslims, you think you settle there and all, or in many other countries, the Muslims who settle over there, they had adopted the lifestyles and all, everything over there. But in period of time with the radicalization, what changes are coming? Wearing hijab. They were not wearing earlier. And now they say they are proud of it. And one only has to witness a flight landing at Dubai. I have witnessed it 2 times. The moment announcement is made in the flight, we are going to land at Dubai, you find the most prettiest girl sitting in that plane, you know, in the most Western attires, suddenly their burqas come over them. So one is this desire also of a free atmosphere to move into, where they can have a different lifestyle and all. But, and most of it was related to that, as this question is, that why they wanted to move to these countries. But over the years, this has been now taken over by radicalization. It may be forced radicalization, it may be silencing their voices, it may be, you know, through threats, or it may be someone genuinely feeling also out of some concerns related to that. But that has been one of the reasons in that. And of course, the third is now with this Gazwa Hind and Gazwa Europe kind of things coming, that you move into those territories where you will be able to, not now, after 5 years, after 10 years and all. I remember a slogan which I saw in the intelligence report of 47 November, in our intelligence reports. And I had heard that slogan as a child in Meerut. I hail from Meerut. कि लड़के लिया था पाकिस्तान, हंस के लेंगे हिंदुस्तान. Now this kind of thinking prevails in some people who think on those lines. And that is why I started by saying this, that when you take a refuge in a country, you should at least respect the constitution of that country. You should respect the customs of that country also. You follow your customs, no one is denying that. But don't change the entire scenario and culture of those countries, that the kind of riots you have seen in France and other places about the wearing of hijab or all these things related to those kind of things which have happened, that you are pushing your own girls back into that fold. I remembered a very interesting, I don't know whether it is a joke or reality. Someone sent me that a person was traveling in UK in a coach, and there was music going on the coach. And this fellow went very angry and told the driver, okay, you should close the music. And the driver said, why? He said, my religion doesn't allow this kind of music. So the driver stopped the car and asked him to move out of the coach. Why should I move out? Because your religion never told you that you should move in coaches. So it is, as Sheetal is saying, and you see there's another aspect. How many studies have been conducted and this will further, carry forward Sheetal's thing, and I think she has been working on that. Take into account the psychological aspects in this. The moment we talk of refugee contributions and all, we start talking of economy. They contribute to the economy. They contribute to the this. Has any study been made that how they psychologically impact that society or are affected by that society? But it is ultimately this psyche which decides the way the person will be going. And I think it's time that psychologists should move into this field in a big way to understand this. I think I answered this one. Some more explanation.
I think some Professor Kumar, are you there?
Yeah, I'm very much there. I said I answered this. If some other thing is there, then I can do that.
Okay. Next question is from Mr. Birendra Bed, and this is for Professor Sheetal Sharma. Are refugees creating threat to host countries for their securities and cultural ethos?
Not all, but some.
Yes, Virendra ji, there are two ways to look at it. Dono diverse position extreme. One is security of the refugees, and the other one is security from the refugees. And in between, you have 0 to 99 positions that exist. Yes, there are reasons to feel threatened by them also, because if I put the harmless and the naive category on one hand, the other one, and even among naive, I'll tell you, there is a very interesting social psychological mechanism that operates, and it is among all of us, and this has got nothing to do with refugees. And I'll tell you something, and I'll show you something. If you are from management science background, there is a gentleman called as Maslow. MASLOW. And Maslow has given an understanding of a need hierarchy. And he says that individuals' needs move up in the stages of hierarchy. The first stage of need is the physiological need. The second are the safety needs. Here you have food, water. Here you have shelter, clothing. The third, he says, is the need of love and community. The fourth need, he says, is of esteem, self-esteem and recognition. And finally is self-actualization. This is a simple need hierarchy that Maslow identifies. And he says individuals fulfill their need in this direction. Now, in the case of
Professor Kumar, can you just mute it? Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Now, this is a normal management science theory that we teach, when we talk about individuals' job satisfaction and all these things. In the context of refugees, I'll add another level in the bottom, and this is the first need of survival. That even if you do not have water, you are breathing, you are alive. And what happens? This stage of survival is the first factor that leads to going somewhere. And then you look for their physiological needs, safety, and up to here, you are settled in another ground. But then what happens? The moment all this happens, and this is for you and me also, and even the petro-Islam, that the phenomena that we call, all these guys are rich, stinkingly rich, they have money, everything at disposal. Now, what do I look for? The self-actualization is, brothers and sisters, only in Sanatan Dharma. Ki jitna upar jao, andar dekho. The self-actualization there gets inverted into looking in the outside world and creating trouble. Ab kya? What do I make? How do I make use of this money which I have spent on everything, having a bathtub which is of gold? Now what do? Let me fund the activities. And they are using these people as moharas, as pawns. Ye chala chal idhar chalai to udhar chalai. And this is true of everybody. Even if it is, say for example, a normal Muslim or somebody who now as moves up starts looking back into Once the basic set of needs are fulfilled, you start identifying yourself with your religion, and you start asserting your faith to greater extent. You compromise only unless your survival needs are not met, your physiological needs are not met. Once in a comfortable position, as I was saying, when they come, they are looking for a quest for survival, and once they are settled, they unfold their cultural baggage. अपना जैसे ही सामान खोलते हैं वो तो it's a short term, but in medium and long term, when the cultural baggage is unfolded, and then finally the right of not, I will not call it as right, but the sense of self-determination and assertion that okay, we need this, that is the point where the adjustment and everything, as I'm saying, everything is a two-way process. It's a two-way process in terms of acceptance and pushing a step forward. So these are two-way things. We talk about multiculturalism, interculturalism in Europe, this and that, but all this is a two-way step. And in Europe, particularly when I talk about this issue of radicalization, people get attracted towards. And there can be another seminar on that modernity and hollowness that the Western values have created among people, alienation, hollowness, individualism, so much so that there is no purpose in life. Everything is taken care of. Even if you're unemployed, you get some monthly income in order to survive. So what is the quest? Quest, the fire in the belly has been quenched because of the advancement level, the level of development taken care of by the system. So kya hota hai? Then you look for some alternative means of meaningfulness coming to your life. And in that, you get attracted to certain ideologies, certain ideas that gives you a sense of purpose, gives you a sense of meaning, gives you a sense of belongingness or association. And that is why people also get easily, attracted towards the fold, radicalization or conversion and all these things. So these are part and parcel of everything. You can have a concept map, you relate one to another, and it's a big web unfolding. Shakti, over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Sharma. Next question is for Professor Kumar, and this is from Mr. Narendra Neganidhi ji. His question is, please throw some light on refugee intruder status on Indian border, east and west both.
Well, I don't know what should I say about the status. You see, one thing we should remember is that after 47, the coming of refugees from West Pakistan stopped at a time. Stop in the sense that, maybe 1, 2, 5 families later on, sometimes in Rajasthan and Gujarat, or they came, but the influx was stopped. And in stopping this influx, our Prime Minister of that time also played a major role. I don't know how many people know this, that when Hindus from Karachi wanted to leave for India, they were denied ships. And the ships were stopped. And there were occasions, and there are the newspaper reports and testimonies to that effect, that when particularly the Dalits wanted to leave Pakistan and come to India, they were held back at gunpoint. Okay, if you leave, who will do these jobs here in this country? These are recorded. From the eastern side, the influx never stopped. It didn't even stop with the creation of Bangladesh. It continues even today. And interestingly, it is not of Hindus alone. It is of the Muslim community also. But some, after this emergence of ISIS and Taliban, I have myself toured some of these areas on the eastern side. And the kind of things which are happening, beside the smuggling part and all that, I'm not talking of animal cow smuggling or drug smuggling and all these. But the planting of radical ideas, there will be people who will cross over in the night at about 12 or 1, deliver lectures till 5 o'clock in the morning, and be back into Bangladesh. And these people with all vigor and all, give their experiences that how they had fought in Syria, how they had fought in Iraq, how he has driven a tank, how he has fought with the gun. All those stories to radicalize. And I don't know where this will take us to. I'm not against any community. I'm not against any religion. But these are some issues of concern which are taking place. In spite, and I told you that in many cases this happens can't happen without political privilege. I've told you, I've talked with engineers from CPWD who were doing the wiring. On the Bangladesh border, they wanted to put the wiring and phones came, oh, leave this village, leave this area. Because the adjoining district happened to be the constituency of a central minister. Assam I am talking of. Very famous minister he used to be from Silchar. Abdul Ghani Khan Chaudhary. Those times I am talking of. I am not talking of the present times and all that. And now when our eastern western side, the government has come out with a regulation handing over 50 kilometers to the border security force. Now that to the security of the country will be decided by the Supreme Court. That some government moves to Supreme Court. Making a mockery of every defense aspect of this country. It is becoming a joke. That every defense aspect will be, because it is democracy. Which country in the world
Professor Kumar, I think
will the Americans give in the plane? So the situation is alarming more on the eastern. In western, well, we have done surgical strikes, we have done Balkot, which stopped some process. Again, it is renewing. Now, what do you call these terrorists? Do I call them migrants? Do I call them intruders? Do I call them refugees? What do I call them? And my analysis, I hope it goes wrong. After the happenings in Afghanistan, my analysis is that what we are seeing in Kashmir today as infiltration by the terror groups, it will start more now in the Rajasthan, Punjab. They've started trying in Punjab. It will start more on Rajasthan and Gujarat borders, because those borders, many areas are still very open. And we'll have that.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Kumar. Next question is by Harjal Simon. This question is for Professor Sharma. Professor Sharma, can you give some examples of big changes in demography due to refugee movement?
Yes, one interesting example I'll give you from Germany. And there was a professor from Germany who was visiting JNU, and he said that this is around 2017. And they said that Germany distributed people into different communities and villages and all that. And the old school buildings and these things were made available for refugees to settle, and they were welcoming them with open arms. And this professor says that there was a small village with a population of 400 people. And they said that, okay, all right, your village can have some 100 people settled in a school building, and you please take care of them in short run. And then that was okay. And over a period of time, there was a committee to look into that, what is the success rate of settlement and integration of these people. So they went and checked, okay, all right, these people have been taken care of well, nicely settled. They said, now give them another 200 as a consequence of settling or integrating them well. Now 100 is just 25%. But if you bring 300 more, or you make it 300 versus 400, it will change the demographic character. It's just like mixing a color in water. How much do you mix in order to change it? As far as this is evolution, civilization, it's a long process, 5,000 years, that's a different story. But everything is happening in such a short period of time. And also these people, as I was saying, that when they open their cultural baggage, they even do not wait for 5 months to settle and do this. The very next day, they just want a prayer space or namaz space or their own things and like that. Sorry to use some examples from the particular community, but then this is identified as one of the problematic area. And then you change the whole character. This is something which is problematic. And it's not just in Germany. I gave you just one example. World over, the bordering. Russia, China is going to have a great problem in future because large number of Chinese are getting settled into Eastern Russian border. The similar is the case in Assam. Just now, Kapil sir explained about Assam ka border and large number of influx of people there, that side. And when the people are there, they are changing the color or the composition or the fabric of the demographic character. Nothing problematic about it if it is driven by general set of principles which are very universal in nature, say modernity. But if it is a clear-cut imposition of certain selective values, cultural symbols and artifacts upon you, then it becomes a problem. And particularly in Europe, when you look at Europe, Europe had 2 times only. One, when religion was too dominant, too huge an institution, and then Enlightenment, modernity, and they separated religion and made it an ordinary, mundane institution existing as other institutions. This was deconstruction of religion, and religion did not die. I'm not saying that secularization led to death of religion, but religion became one of the institution and my private affair. The best example is that those who visit Europe, you will see the highest building in the street is church. Highest building, and the rest of the houses are like 2 floor, 3 floor, or maximum 4 or 5. What was this indicating? Since time immemorial, jab architecture was not there, the machines were not there, at that point of time also they were constructing the biggest of this. And then the religion was reduced to a normal thing. They divorced, they separated, church separated from the state, secularization defined in Western sense. So that once they have done it, they have settled for it. Everybody, irrespective, although of course they were culturally more homogeneous as compared to South Asia, because all of them were civilizationally Christians. Or the other thing that they had were Jews, and there was the fallouts were very inhuman, ghastly in nature. So there was cultural homogeneity. We were very diverse. Otherwise also, if not religious, otherwise also linguistic, regional, this wide variety of diversity. But all this diversity was very beautifully, existing in a mosaic of cultural diversity in and out there. So we also treated religion in a very special way. And in the modern bureaucratic, democratic sense, we also treated religion. Religion is their equidistant, principled distance from all the religions of the state. We had a different kind of operating system. They had a different kind of operating system. But in all the operating systems, there is a virus getting in. That, okay, fine, you may be talking about globalization, democratic institution, modernization, and all these things. But religion, hum to nahi chodenge. So what do you do with this set of circumstances? You really need to take a very strong position. And yes, one thing, that when it comes to profit making, when it comes to counting the money that is there, like Shakti mentioned about cryptocurrency and all, even the transnational corporations or multinational corporations, are they not worldwide? Do we call them refugees? They are having their head office in one area, they are operating other, the labor of one country is being used, taxes are being paid, and because this is a win-win situation for everyone. You tend to consume, you tend to be part of the corporation, you have a label, you generate employment, you pay money, you get money. No matter there is a degree of exploitation and the arguments related to tax, everybody whosoever is part of this MNC or TNC, transnational corporation, is a stakeholder, greater or to lesser extent. But we don't call them as refugees. Why? It only comes when it comes to something called as a cultural construction. There's a problem. And cultures, unless they tend to be pitched against one another. The fifth dimension that I talk about, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, unless until it is actually realized, they would continue to see each other as the top four: anomaly, hierarchy, distinction, conversion, and all these things. And these are all areas where you play out politics vigorously in order to attract or eliminate somebody. That's a win, not a win-win situation. It's a win-lose kind of condition.
Thank you, Professor Sharma. Actually, we have an armada of questions lined up for our panelists, but we don't have much time. And I see most of those questions have already been answered by both our distinguished panelists. But I will take 2 more questions, and then we'll just wrap up the session. This question is for Professor Kumar. This is from Mr. Gyanindra Mishraji. His question is, have refugees ever been a boon for their destination in the long run?
Have refugees been ever a?
Have refugees ever been a boon for their destination in the long run? Whether they are, they contribute.
It depends, I'll tell you. Many of the refugees who, because of communist torture, left Soviet Union, they prepared to be a boon for Americans and Britishers. Sheetal can correct me on that. Same is the case for China also. And you see, it's a very interesting thing that why people move out of communist countries. I have not seen any refugees going to communist countries. Sheetal is another angle to be looked into. Okay, no one went to Soviet Union for refuge, but people from Soviet Union came out for refuge, or from China came out for refuge. There's a simple reason for this, that in no communist country in the world there are any rights for its citizens. They may call themselves Marxist or communist or whatever they are, but show me a single communist country in the world which has given any of these rights of liberty, rights of freedom, even right to educate or right to do a job, etc., or the legal system in their countries. So yes, of course, they have been a boon where they have moved out of communist countries. They have been a boon. For us, some refugees have been boon who moved out after Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. They did prove helpful to us for our defense operations or certain things related to that. The Tibetan refugees who came to India after Chinese occupation of Tibet. Don't forget that we created an Indo-Tibetan border force also. And the Tibetans, besides we helping them, they also helped us in certain ways in relation to our northeastern borders with China. Now, I know more of India. I've not studied Europe and all other places related to that. But yes, in certain cases, they have been.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Kumar. This will be the last question for this session. This is for Professor Sharma. This is from Mr. Prabhakarji. The question is, are the challenges to India are different than challenges to European countries with regard to refugee? Please give your opinion on how to handle these challenges.
The challenges are similar because they are about threat to survival. They are against integration. They are against unity and integrity of country. They are related to terror threats. The basic content of the threats are similar to Europe and to India, but their manifestation is different. The manifestation is different because of the different administrative setups and the kind of value systems that we have and socio-cultural settings. Say, for example, in India, we tend to see it as one community versus the other community, or on the border issues on both the sides, East and West Pakistan was issue related to Islam. In Europe, it's not just about Islam, it is also about a kind of system where they are challenging the basic value system, the way of life, and everything that is existing. There were times when the administrative and you may say the technological setup were not as elaborate and as developed in order to tackle these issues and threats. And in fact, there was no need earlier, when if I take you 5-6 centuries back. And then in the present times, that both the administrative and the technical setup is there in order to handle these situations. The underlying threats are common because they are threat to your demographic balance, they are threat to your peace, they are threat to your internal security, they are threat to your economy in many senses, to your people, and many other things which we have discussed. And I also see that something related to hawala in the chat box, and why this hawala is flourishing, or why these gangsters or traffickers are flourishing, because somewhere they have some kind of political patronage or lack of will. If political patronage you are uncomfortable with, there's a lack of will or mechanism to deal with it. I'm being very, very, very soft in terms of saying this because I'm in the virtual world. But remember, if you have seen this Jamtara, I've just heard about it, but I know many of the victims of the online frauds. These Jamtara people, they fool you, they cheat you of 5,000, 10,000, and they're online. You get cheated and you want to see, the next day the person has switched off his mobile, and you want to vent out your anger and give some mota galis to the person that you have cheated me of my hard-earned 5 or 10,000 rupees. They are existing. How come in the world where you have such strong surveillance system to locate people on the basis of triangulation, your stolen things are found if it is required, if it is actually some effort is invested into? What kind of system is it where these people are existing? And they are openly roaming around. They are also answering your calls, and then when you want to say something to them, they just disconnect you. This entire Jamtara issue I'm talking about. Similar is with hawala. Similar is with trafficking. Who gets, a kind of slip route in order to perpetuate the kind of businesses they are doing? Because they are hand in glove with some systems, some mechanisms that leave them aside. And this is something which is related to corruption. It's not just about our society, it's a milieu world over in greater or lesser degree. Communist countries have seen it greater in proportion and percentage. The liberal countries have seen it less because somehow it comes down to the individual and all these things. But the total package is that no matter communism or socialism, no matter developed or developing, the social problems in greater or lesser extent are always there. We are on a continuum of modernization. We are aspiring to become something like one day. But in the process of that journey, becoming something like one day, we are dealing with our own indigenous set of issues, advantages and disadvantages, which actually change the character of this journey that we are going through. हम ट्रेन में तो जा रहे हैं, but किस तरीके की जर्नी कर रहे हैं, that influences, it gets influenced by the local conditions of various regions, economies, societies. But ultimate goal remains to reach there. No matter in greater or lesser degree, sometimes religion is more dominant, sometimes caste is more dominant, sometimes economic issues become pertinent, ideological, political. It depends upon condition and the domestic's need at that point of time. But yes, the issues are common, the threats are common, the challenges are common, but the tackling mechanisms have to be rooted into the context in which you are tackling with them, because as I said earlier, one size does not fit all.
Okay, thank you, Professor Sharma. Now we have come to the flag end of our session. As expected, we got a comprehensive viewpoint about these refugee issues, and surely this will enhance our understanding about refugee issues and all other associated aspects of refugee issues. Now I request Mr. Harjal Simon to offer a vote of thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. On behalf of Vishwadhan Kendra, I would like to thank the distinguished speakers, Dr. Kapil Kumar ji, Dr. Sheetal Sharma ji, for their insightful talk. It was really informative. I'd also like to thank Dr. Sakti Prasad for handling the moderator's role effectively for second session in a row. I'd like to thank the entire Vishwadhan Kendra team for taking efforts to make this event successful. With this, I'd like to call end for the program. Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Namaskar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste, namaste.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
यार क्या हाल है?
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Dr. Sheetal. Namaste.
बस मैं एक वेबिनार कर रहा हूँ, मैं 5 मिनट में तुम्हें वापस करता हूँ.